All right, let's talk about ADHD. Today, we're going to look at it through a totally new lens, moving way beyond those old stereotypes to get at what's really going on inside the brain.
For so long, the name itself, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, has kind of framed the whole conversation. It makes you think there's just a deficit, right? That something's missing. But what if that's not it at all? What if the name itself has been pointing us in the wrong direction this whole time? Well, there's a really fascinating new idea that just flips the script. What if the main problem isn't about a deficit in attention at all? What if it's actually a fundamental problem with how the brain manages its energy? Okay, so let's get into it. This new model is sometimes called energy deficit hyperactivity disorder, or EDHD, and it's gaining some serious traction. The whole idea is to reframe ADHD not as some kind of permanent flaw, but more like a problem with, well, energy logistics. Think of it as a brain that's fantastic in short bursts, but just really struggles with that long-term metabolic endurance. So the first thing we have to wrap our heads around is that thinking, well, it isn't free. It's actually really expensive, biologically speaking. Every single thought, every decision, every second of focus, it all comes with a price tag, and our brain has to pay up. And the currency it uses for that payment? It's a tiny molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Just think of it like the cellular level gasoline that powers everything in your body, especially the complex machinery of your brain cells. It's the juice that keeps the lights on. Now, there's a part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's basically the CEO, the headquarters for all the big stuff. Focus, planning, keeping your impulses in check. And this HQ, it is incredibly fuel hungry. It's a total energy hog, and it gets really fussy if its energy supply dips, even a little bit. So if you look at it through this energy lens, that moment when your focus just flickers and dies, it's not a character flaw. It's not a lack of willpower. It's literally like a brownout in your brain. The power grid is overloaded, the demand for energy is just way higher than the supply at that moment. And this is where it gets really cool, because it gives us a whole new way to think about hyperactivity. You know, all that fidgeting, that leg bouncing, the constant need to move, it might actually be the brain's desperate attempt to pull start its own engine, like frantically cranking one of those emergency generators to get the power back on. And this model, it really helps explain something that a lot of people with ADHD experience. That strange, confusing paradox of feeling completely wiped out mentally, but at the same time, you're physically restless.
I mean, it sounds like a total contradiction, right? How can you be so mentally drained you can barely think, yet so physically wired you can't possibly sit still? What is going on there?
Okay, so this really gets to the core of it. It's like this constant tug of war inside the brain. First, the brain is just working overtime, trying to compensate for things, and that causes massive mental fatigue. So what does the body do to fight that fatigue? It craves stimulation. It wants to move. Then you throw in things like poor sleep, which messes up the brain's whole nightly repair cycle, or the massive energy drain from hyper-focusing on something you love, or even just dealing with big emotions, and boom, you're stuck in this exhausting cycle of burnout and restlessness.
Okay, so with this new energy model in our back pocket, we can start to debunk some of the biggest myths about ADHD. Let's start with the classic one. They can't focus on anything. We've all heard it, right? The kid who can play video games for 5 hours straight but can't focus on homework for 5 minutes. The old view says it's willpower, but the new view, it's about regulating attention. Think about it from an energy perspective. A video game is a fire hose of dopamine and reward. It's like a direct fuel injection for the brain. Homework? That's a slow, steady energy drain with a payoff that's way off in the future. The ADHD brain looks at its energy budget and just says, nope, can't afford that right now. Okay, next myth. You have to be hyperactive to have ADHD. This one is a huge and honestly a really harmful misunderstanding. For so many people, the H for hyperactivity isn't about bouncing off the walls. It's internal. It's a brain that is always on, racing with a million thoughts at once, even when the body is sitting perfectly still. It's just a different way that the same struggle to regulate energy shows up. And you know what? This inattentive type is actually seen a lot more in girls, and it's a huge reason why they've been so underdiagnosed for decades. Their symptoms, daydreaming, forgetfulness, being disorganized, they aren't as disruptive in a classroom, right? So instead of getting help, their struggle gets mislabeled as just a personality flaw. They get called spacey or lazy, when the reality is they are fighting this exhausting, invisible battle inside their own heads every single day. So all this brings up a really important question, one that a lot of parents wrestle with. How do you know the difference between a kid who's just got a lot of energy and a kid who might have ADHD?
And here's the real key. It's not about the amount of energy, it's about the ability to regulate that energy. A high-energy kid can usually pump the brakes when they need to, when the teacher asks them to quiet down, for example. But for a child with ADHD, that struggle with control, with organization, with following instructions, it's consistent. It shows up everywhere, at school, at home, with their friends. It's a persistent pattern.
And that's exactly why getting a proper professional evaluation is so important. You can't just do a blood test or a brain scan and get an answer. A real diagnosis is a careful process. It involves talking to parents, getting reports from teachers, and clinical observation to really put all the pieces of the puzzle together and see the whole picture.
All right, so if we start thinking about ADHD as an energy management problem, what does that mean for, well, managing it? It means the solution is no longer just try harder or focus more. It's about learning how to refuel the brain in a smarter way. This is a total mindset shift. The goal isn't fixing a deficit anymore. It's about actively and strategically managing your brain's unique energy budget. We're not aiming for these short, unsustainable bursts of focus that lead to burnout. The real goal is stability and endurance. It's about learning to work with your brain's natural rhythms, not constantly fighting against them. So, I'll leave you with this question. What if we stopped focusing so much on attention and started focusing on energy? It really changes everything, doesn't it? It moves the conversation away from blame and limitation and towards management and empowerment. It's a much more hopeful and, frankly, a much more accurate way to understand the remarkable, powerful, and yes, high-energy ADHD brain.
This presentation was inspired by the brain energy crisis research from Simpler Psychology and the EDHD models discussed by MindTrek Counseling, the Autism Service, and the Child Mind Institute. You can find links to these original sources in the video description below. We hope this new perspective on ADHD helps you navigate your professional and personal journey with greater clarity.